All right, so in this video, we will take a look at the data join transformation functionality, understand what it is, and we'll take a look at a few examples on how to apply it and what you can do with it. So first things first, let's understand the join a bit more. I like to think about it as a VLOOKUP type functionality. What it really does is it will take records from the first table and it will match it with the records from the second table based on some sort of a identifier column or columns. It looks like this if we were to apply it. We'll take a look at real examples here in a second. So we'll need to select sources we want to join together and pick field or fields that this join needs to be performed on. Now that theory is out of the way, let's take a look at some real examples. So my first example is something that folks running lots of marketing campaigns can run into, or agencies. Imagine that we run meta ads advertisement. I've already preloaded all the data source settings, so we'll just be looking at use cases. And I want to see my basic metrics like cost, clicks, impressions, all that based on dates. And then my client provides me with some sort of a very straightforward Google Sheet where they track number of new leads and associated revenue based on that date separately, right? So in Coupler, I would plug in my meta ads by connecting it directly to the API. And then I would also plug in Google Sheets as my source. That is essentially the same file that I just showed you. And since we have this report date as one line for each date with all the metrics that we need, we can then perform a join in order to derive this table over here that will show us data from Facebook ads plus the Google Sheet. And I had some fun and utilized the formula-based column to derive myself ROAS based on this data. Join would look something like this, where I say, let's take my meta ads performance data, join it with the revenue tracker that I have based on the report date. Extremely straightforward. As soon as I hit join, this is exactly what I get. So now I can send this information to my Google Sheet. I will make sure to pick join as the data set to share. And then here, just clicking through the flow of the application, I will pick my file. And then let's say in this same file, I now want to have a second sheet that will showcase Facebook plus revenue plus that ROAS that we calculated. We'll take a few seconds to execute here, and then we can take a look at the final result. All right, so now that import is successful in revenue, we will have our sheet number 2, basically with a blended table from Facebook ads plus all the other information from the sheet 1 of this file and the calculated ROAS as well. Let's move on to the second example now. So second example is going to be quite interesting. This is something that our content team uses internally. I've preloaded one of the templates we have in our gallery, but it's a beautiful example for the join. The use case is that we want to look at the landing page performance and grab certain metrics from Search Console and certain metrics from GA4. So in order to derive a table like this, we first need to join the data properly, as you may have guessed, on the landing page as our key. So let's take a look at how it's done in the data flow. So we've preloaded all the data sources in here. We have our Search Console that grabs clicks, impressions, and positions. I'll skip over the specifics, but we also use a formula-based column to derive the landing page tail, because by default you only have page and site URL. And we will have a dedicated tutorial on all the cool things you can do with the formula-based feature. So let's move on for now. And then in GA4, we're grabbing this landing page dimension, all the metrics that we need from GA4 as a source, and then an additional GA4 source where we apply a key events filter based on the same dimension so that we can then have Search Console data such as clicks, impressions, position, then all of the GA4 stuff around new users, bounce rates, purchases, and so on, and also key events in the blend. The join would look like this. We are basically doing 2 joins in a row based on our landing page as the dimension. So grabbing Google Search Console, blending it with GA4 pages, and then the GA4 key event users data source. As an end result, we'll get a table that will look just like this, or rather a data set. So you'll have a few things blended from the key events, quite a few from GA4 pages, and then the initial source is GA4, just like you can see over here, Search Console. And then as an end result, we can replicate this table just like this in our report, be it Google Sheets or Looker Studio. All right, and let's take a look at the third and final example for this video. And in this case, we'll be looking at the LinkedIn Ads Creatives dataset, which requires a few joins to the ad analytics on the creatives, campaigns, and campaign groups in order to then derive a report or a creative performance table that will show you the group, name, ad ID, and your ad name. So it's quite peculiar on how LinkedIn API returns you data on multiple dimensions. So if we wanted to have campaign ID, campaign group, and creative link in here or URN, we need to have multiple dimensions in our data source, as you can see over here. But then for some reason, it doesn't return the names linked to these campaigns or groups or creatives. So that's why we plug in 3 other sources from LinkedIn that are specifically campaign groups with their ID and a name. Same for LinkedIn campaigns, so we'll have the ID and names, and same is also true for creatives. So then, since we have all of these IDs in our ad analytics data source, all we have to do is we have to once again perform a join, or actually a few of them here. So we grab the ad analytics data, and based on those IDs, we match campaign groups, campaigns, and then also LinkedIn creatives. As an end result, we'll have all of our ad analytics with these properly looking dimensions with the names that ultimately allow us to build a table in a report that looks just like this, and do different filters based on campaign names. If we wanted to, we can add a campaign group filter in here, and so on. So hopefully this gives you a better idea on what the join data is, how it works. Feel free to visit our knowledge base over here in the join. There will be a link in the description to read a bit more on how it works and take a look at some other examples. And we'll see you in the next one.